My guest on the podcast today is Bryan Hoch of MLB.com. Bryan has covered New York baseball for the past 2 decades, working the New York Yankees clubhouse as an MLB.com beat reporter since 2007. Bryan is the author of The Baby Bombers, the inside story of the next Yankees dynasty, which was published in 2018, and a co-author of Mission 27, a new boss, a new ballpark, and one last ring for the Yankees core 4. Bryan joins me to talk about Yankees baseball and answer 5 key questions about the upcoming season.
Hey, Derek. How are you?
Hey, Bryan. How's it going?
Great. Wow, that is some great setup you got there. That is gorgeous.
It looks nice, but it smells like cat piss.
Well, luckily we can't smell it through the Zoom.
I think fans, myself included, look at Game 2 of the division series last year, and they think, hey, if we just had a really good number 2 behind Garrett Cole, we could have won that series. What do you think the Yankees are planning for 2021? Because they really haven't addressed the rotation at all. There are a number of arms available. Do you think that they're just going to stick it out and wait for Luis Severino to come back? Or do you think they believe in Jordan Montgomery stepping up? What do you think?
I think that's definitely part of it. I think they are going to bank on Severino coming back and being kind of like a trade deadline acquisition. Don't forget, you're also getting Domingo Germán back, and who knows what that is. That's a wild card there because he hasn't pitched professionally in more than a year. But that rotation has not been addressed yet. That was the reason why they did that whole Davy Garcia, Jay Happ thing. They thought they were thin there in the rotation. They were right. And, there's no guarantee. We can go back and relitigate that 100 times and say, well, they should have done this. I personally would have liked to have seen Davy Garcia go a little longer in that game. I didn't understand the logic. I see your Masahiro Tanaka cup there. He's a big question mark too. I'd like to see Tanaka come back. I think that I'd feel better about the rotation with Tanaka, but I guess everything right now hinges on DJ LeMahieu, and I think that he is the chip that needs to fall to determine where they go with everything. Because if LeMahieu goes to the Dodgers or the Blue Jays and isn't back in the Yankee pinstripes, then to me, all bets are off. Like, they can go after Trevor Bauer. Like, they can there's nothing holding them back. But right now, they've made it clear that LeMahieu is their priority. I think DJ wants to come back. I think that if all things are equal, he will come back. But if he doesn't, then they can go do whatever. And starting pitching is definitely an area that if I'm Brian Cashman, I want to address, and I can make a big move there.
Brian Cashman has shown in the past that, when it's warranted, he'll surprise us. The Mark Teixeira thing, he was not going into the winter of 2009 planning to get Mark Teixeira. But when Teixeira became an opportunity for them, he pounced. He never planned on Giancarlo Stanton, but when it arose, he went after it. And I agree with you. I think if LeMahieu somehow ends up in, let's say, Los Angeles, then I think the counter move is to go out and improve your pitching and improve your run prevention.
Absolutely. I think, and look, Teixeira is a great example there because the Yankees were done that offseason. They had Nick Swisher, if you remember, he was going to play first base. They had Xavier Nady in right field. I've got, where is it here? Mission 27 right behind me. So I've definitely done the research on this, but they were done. And so they'd done CC Sabathia, AJ Burnett, and credit to Hal Steinbrenner because they saw that it looked like Teixeira was going to go to Boston. And credit to Hal Steinbrenner, they looked in the Steinbrenner family couch cushions or whatever they did, and they found 8 years and $180 million, and it resulted in a World Series championship. And so, look, that piece was out there. It was floating out there. It wasn't part of the plan, but they said, hey, we could stop Teixeira from going to Boston and make ourselves better. And maybe that's exactly what happens this offseason, too. I know it's a completely different financial situation. Look, they weren't coming off a pandemic in 2009, but they were coming off a financial recession. We were in the Great Recession then. So, I think the story of this offseason has not been written yet. And that's a good thing because not much has happened, to be honest with you.
Right. Over the past couple of years, the Yankees have kind of gotten more right-handed heavy than they were during some of their dynasty years and earlier, because with that right field porch, you want to load up on some left-handed hitters. That was a philosophy of Gene Michael. Brian Cashman has even said he likes those big left-handed hairy monsters. But we've been basically very top heavy with right-handed hitters the last few years. Is that something that the Yankees are concerned about? And if so, what are they thinking about correcting this problem?
Yeah, if you go look at the number of home runs that were hit this past year, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but it was something like they got like 12 home runs from a left-handed hitter out of the 84 that they hit. It was something crazy like that. Yeah, it was really ridiculous. And for somebody who grew up watching the Yankees and knowing that how important left-handed power is in Yankee Stadium, I mean, yeah, you're missing that Jason Giambi type guy who can mash the ball over the wall. And so I'm not sure that that's out there. The one thing I would say about the Yankees is they have right-handed hitters who have no problem taking the ball to the opposite field. And I'm talking about Aaron Judge and Giancarlo Stanton. Those guys have massive power. They can hit the ball out no matter what. But especially a LeMahieu, who I think one of his power alleys is to right center. He's kind of very Derek Jetarian in that way, and taking the ball the opposite way and going to right field. And it's something that even Clint Frazier talked about late in September. I think in October he talked about realizing that, hey, there's a lot of money out in right field and you don't have to pull everything. And so I think that look, yes, if you're building a Yankee lineup, I want a bunch of left-handed bats in that lineup. But just as important, if you don't have the lefties, then get me some righties who can hit the ball the opposite way and have that power to the opposite field. But yes, in a perfect world, I would love to see the Yankees go get a big left-handed bat, which is kind of why I thought that a Kyle Schwarber might make sense for them once he got non-tendered by the Cubs and was out there again. But it seems like Cashman was kind of gone off on that, and I think that what that tells you is how hamstrung they are by that Stanton contract. The fact that you brought him in, you thought he was going to be able to play some outfield for you, and now here, 2-3 years in, you're realizing he's so fragile that you have to just DH him, and you can't even trust him to play the outfield. That's going to be a headache for years to come here.
Do you think?
But if he hits the way he did in the postseason, then you're going to live with it, because he really did put the Yankees on their back for the postseason.
Yeah, he was on a historic run. Do you think that Estevan Florial being a left-handed hitter kind of gives him a leg up for that fourth outfielder job? Maybe he'll probably contend with Mike Tauchman for that role. Assuming they don't spend to bring Brett Gardner back, which you would think if they were going to do that, they would have done it by now with such a veteran, respected player. But again, that could be one of those dominoes if money opens up. But Estevan Florial is a guy who's kind of been a prospect for a while, but really hasn't made that jump to the big leagues. Do you think just him being a lefty who has that power potential and obviously some speed where he can play center field and left field at Yankee Stadium, think that gives him a leg up?
Yeah, I haven't thought a whole lot about Florial yet because I'm still waiting for that other shoe to fall on Gardner. It's hard for me to envision a Yankee roster where they don't bring Gardy back. And I know that Gardy has talked a lot about that he doesn't want his last games as a Yankee to be in an empty ballpark. I feel like he'll come back for a small amount of money. But, if he does come back, and he's not going to make what he did last year, but that is going to, as you mentioned, be another roadblock for a guy like Florial, who I think does deserve a chance. The outfield production is there as far as he can play all three positions. I think you can put him wherever you have to. And Tauchman, I thought, took a step back. And I know this was a weird 2020 pandemic shortened year. He's one of those guys, along with Gary Sanchez, for example, who, maybe that wasn't just who he is, because we saw who Mike Tauchman can be in 2019, and that was pretty impressive. Yeah, I'd like to see a battle in spring training between Florial and, man, watching Florial run is so fun. We got to see it a little bit at the big league level. He finally got to make his debut, and that was cool. But I think that I'm kind of still expecting that Gardner will be back. I don't sense that Brett wants to go finish his career as a Cincinnati Red or a Kansas City Royal or whatever. I feel like that's important to Brett, and I'm still waiting on that. But if he doesn't come back, I definitely want to see Florial in spring training because he is fun to watch.
Before we get to Gleyber Torres, I could see Brett Gardner playing in front of Old Timers Day crowds. That would be, that could be an option. So on to Gleyber Torres. Obviously, did not have a great year last year. He's penciled in as your shortstop right now. That's if you bring back LeMahieu again. He's another guy affected by the domino effect of LeMahieu. Do the Yankees have actual concern about his offensive production, or are they just chalking that up to, hey, he was a little out of shape because of 3 months of inactivity during the lockdown?
Yeah, that's definitely something that Cashman has brought up. The fact that, and we saw it from the press box. You could tell that Gleyber was a little heavier than he should have been to be playing shortstop when he came back from the break, and that was such an unprecedented time that, like, who knew how to stay in shape during that? I mean, I certainly didn't. So, yeah, when we were sitting on the couch and watching Netflix and stuff. So I think that 2020 was just such a weird year for so many different guys. But if you go back to spring training one, we thought that Gleyber's defense was going to be a question mark at shortstop. He was going back to that position after not playing it for a while. And look, as bright a prospect as he is, he's never been a defense first player. He's going to play a good enough shortstop, and he's going to hit 30 home runs for you over the course of a full season. And, maybe more if he gets to play the Baltimore Orioles 19 times.
Oh, way back left field. You gotta be kidding me.
Just put up those ridiculous numbers in Camden Yards. So I think that 2019 was a better indication of who Gleyber is offensively. And defensively, look, we knew he wasn't going to be Didi Gregorius at short. I thought that there was going to be a downgrade going from Didi to Gleyber. But especially if you bring LeMahieu back, Cashman, you mentioned Gene Michael earlier. One of the things that Cashman always talks about from Gene Michael, and I love this saying, is that you want to have a strong spine up the middle. That's catcher, second base, shortstop, center field. You focus your efforts on that and then fill in the rest there. And if you have LeMahieu at second and Gleyber at short, then I like that double play combination a whole lot. And then, you fill in the rest from there. But I think that can kind of offset some of it, especially because the way shifting goes now, you're going to have LeMahieu playing on the shortstop side a lot anyway, or right up the middle. So that can kind of cut down on how much ground. It's not like what you needed Jeter to cover back in the day, because the positioning is so much different than it was in, say, 2002.
That's a great point. I mean, how many times in the playoffs did we see ground balls hit right at people? How many ground ball singles were there during the entire postseason for anybody? It was incredible.
Right up the ground ball up the middle. There's always somebody there, right? Or when there's not, we always notice when there's a ground ball that would have been a routine grounder to short and there's just an empty hole. But how many times, like you mentioned, does the ball get past the pitcher and you're thinking that's a base hit in the center field, and there's LeMahieu and he throws right to first and it's an out.
So one guy we haven't heard a lot about is Miguel Andujar. A couple of years ago, he was setting the world on fire. His defense was always kind of an issue, but the guy could rake. And then he has the shoulder surgery, didn't quite have the same exit velocity, but he looked great. I mean, he looked like he was in great shape. He ran well. I didn't think he looked that bad on defense at first. He had a couple of bonehead plays, but I'm still confident that he can come around and swing the bat at some point. He looked better at the end of last year. What are the Yankees' plans for Miguel Andujar?
Yeah, I think that he's kind of on the outside looking in right now. They tried to kind of make him into a super utility, the outfield experiment. I'm going to cut him some slack there because he hadn't fielded a fly ball since he was like 8 years old. And so the fact that he actually made it into a big league game and played some outfield, I guess, give him some credit for that. But I look at him more as a corner infielder type anyway, going forward. The problem for Andujar is how good Gio Urshela is, and that's still his job. It's his job to lose. The same story as it was coming into 2020. So I think that you're going to look at Urshela at third. Andujar is going to pick up some reps where he can at third, at first. Maybe you play him in left field or right field if you have to, but it's not something I would be trying to do. And once again, this brings me back to the Stanton thing, with Stanton not being able to play the outfield, with them being so frightened of putting him out there because of the injury problems. It really cuts down an opportunity for a guy like Andujar. So just as far as maybe he's a trade chip for them, but he's not somebody that I feel like they're actively shopping. I'm sure that Cashman is getting calls. Cashman has said he's getting calls on Andujar. Teams are asking the same question that you are. Hey, what are your plans for this guy? Because if if you're not going to use him, we could use him. But I don't sense that he's somebody that the Yankees have to move. And there's no look. Urshela had an injury; he's coming off surgery here, and we don't know what his availability is going to be. We think he's going to be ready for opening day, but in Yankee world, nothing is guaranteed until I actually see the guy out there. So, especially on the injury front. So, if Urshela is healthy, I think he'll be the opening day third baseman. But that is far from guaranteed right now.
Right, and we don't know when opening day is actually going to happen. It might be
we
a month.
Also, don't know that, right?
He could have extra time to heal, which it would work out for him, but not so much for the fans who want to get back into.
That reminds me of what Aaron Judge said when he said, "Yeah, I told you I'd be ready for opening day." If you remember, Judge had the cracked rib in spring training, and we were like, "What? Like, no, you won't." He was.
Speaking of Aaron Judge and the injury issues, and Giancarlo Stanton, you've mentioned a few times, the Yankees have had some serious concerns over the past couple years. Guys going down with frequent injuries. A lot of times it seems to fans that there's a lot of misdiagnoses where it's, oh, this guy, for example, Aaron Hicks, he's going to be out a couple of days, ends up being 6 weeks. Aaron Judge just got some soreness. He wouldn't have been back until July. What are the Yankees doing to address this, if anything? And does it mean anything that once everybody came back in the second half of last year in September or whatever it was, that pretty much everybody was healthy through the playoffs?
Yeah, that's a good point, is that, the injuries seem to be better later in the year. And I think that that's one thing, they incorporated this whole new thing under Eric Cressey, the training regimen and stuff. And it kind of got interrupted because they started in January, then everything shut down on March 12 or whatever it was. And so you didn't really get to see the benefits of that because guys were working out on their own at home, and then they hurried up to get back to spring training and summer camp. And you didn't have a normal year. And so I think you're going to have to wait until 2021 or maybe even 2022 to see the full benefits of what they've done. And that's something Cashman was saying. He was talking to somebody with the Minnesota Timberwolves, I think, and they said, "Oh yeah, it's great that you're doing all this new stuff. You're probably going to see more injuries this year." And Cashman was like, "What? No, that's not true." And it actually turned out to be because you saw that kind of hangover effect of James Paxton and Luis Severino and Judge. I mean, those are all 2019 injuries that carried over. Stanton to some extent. Some of that was carryover early. So, I guess the good news is that once things got going, you had a casualty like a Tommy Kahnle, who pitched one inning and was done. But other than that, they didn't have too many devastating injuries. Obviously Judge had the calf thing that he came back too early and popped it. And, look, I just think when you've got these big guys like Judge and Stanton, big production, big problems. And so, it's going to be a big thing for a big thing. I'm using the word big too much, but it is going to be a challenge to keep these guys on the field. And that's where a guy like Eric Cressey comes in with this kind of new regimen that they have. A lot of warm-up routines. They're very secretive about what's actually going on behind the scenes. But I think it's a lot of kind of just making sure that these guys aren't too tight, because I feel like that's part of the problem with, these football players basically in baseball bodies, that baseball is such a quick twitch muscle kind of reaction based sport where you don't want to have an oblique tear, and then that's 6 weeks right there. But you mentioned and I think one thing that you're going to see with the Yankees is they're going to give much more conservative timetables going forward. And if you remember a few years ago when Judge got hit in the wrist with a pitch, Jacob Junis of the Royals hit him, and then they immediately said, "Oh, he'll be back in 3 weeks for a broken wrist." And we all said, "No, there's no way." And they stuck to that timetable, and it wound up being 7.5. And it really created a problem for Judge, who was frustrated because he knew he wasn't going to come back in 3 weeks. But of course, the team gave that timetable. And so we all kept asking, "Hey, it's week 4. What's going on?" It's week 5. And that was an unfair timetable, I think. So they're going to be more conservative and less aggressive with that stuff going forward, I would expect.
You mentioned James Paxton in there. Has there been any talk of James Paxton that you've heard? I mean, he's a guy that when he's healthy, he's filthy, but it seemed like last year after that back surgery, he definitely lost a tick on that fastball.
Yeah, he didn't seem to be all the way back. And I think part of that is shutting everything down in spring training. I mean, I was doing some research for the book that I'm working on, and Paxton was throwing in what used to be a vending machine warehouse up in Wisconsin. Like, he wasn't at Steinbrenner Field pitching against competitive talent. Like, he didn't have coaches there going with him. He had one of his buddies just kind of watching him pitch and being like, "Oh, that looks good." And it's like, not exactly what you need. It would have been great to have Matt Blake and some of the rehab coordinators overlooking that. And so I think that when he did come back, it was a quick ramp up, and he just wasn't ready. He wasn't all the way back. And, they tried it, but it wasn't there. And so I think that if he has a more normal offseason here, and I know he's got a showcase coming up, he's going to throw for, I think, 15 to 20 teams. There's going to be interest. I mean, the talent is there. We've seen it. We've seen flashes of it. But that's the story of James Paxton's career is, if he can be healthy, then look how good he could be. And, he threw no hitter up at the Rogers Center when he was with Seattle. And, like, the talent is off the charts, but you gotta post, as the players say. And, we're still waiting on that first year where James Paxton makes 34 starts.
Yeah, I mean, the off-season, I guess, COVID type of training was just so interesting for everybody. It kind of reminded me of, and I wasn't around for this, but what it must have been like for the olden days, like in the 50s, where somebody would play baseball all season and then go have to deliver beer in the winter for 6 months, to pay the bills. But
Yogi Berra sold dishwashers at Sears. Like, believe that? Can you imagine? Yogi Berra, Hall of Famer, and then it's November and he's in New Jersey when you got to go buy a washing machine at Sears or something, and he's trying to sell you a riding mower or something.
I can promise you this. He was probably one of their top salespeople, because who's going to say no to Yogi Berra? Bryan, thanks so much. Everybody check out his books. I read The Baby Bombers. It's just fantastic. I still have to read Mission 27. Are you going to write a Mission 28 if there ultimately is a 28th championship in the next few years?
Well, I can tell you, no, I've got a book about the 2020 season coming out. It's called The Bronx Zoom, and it'll be out June 8th. And it's, yeah, you like that. And it's just kind of the craziest, most bizarre season in Yankees history. And I felt like there was so much going on behind the scenes with baseball shutting down and the pandemic, and playing a season coming back amid the backdrop of, we've got the Black Lives Matter movement happening and this wild presidential election happening. And there was just so much. I feel like when people pick this book up, they're going to be like, I can't believe all that happened in 2020. And look, the story didn't end the way we were hoping to. We started doing the book in August or so, and it was kind of like, well, the Yankees are World Series favorites, so we'll see where this goes. And it didn't get quite as far as we wanted to, but there was definitely a lot of cool stuff going on behind the scenes that I think Yankee fans haven't heard these stories yet, and they're going to be interested to hear more about what happened really in 2020.
Well, the original book, The Bronx Zoo, actually got turned into The Bronx is Burning, which is one of the great ESPN miniseries about the Yankees. Let's hope that we can see the Bronx Zoom someday as a series. Bryan, thanks so much for joining me. Doing a lot for my channel here. I really appreciate your time.
You got it, Derek. Yeah, I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. It helps other Yankees fans find the channel. Sponsorships are always available, so feel free to reach out to me on Twitter @NYYRecaps. Thanks for watching.